Next on The Professional Rule Breaker.
Hi, I'm Debbie Draves Legg from Equine, and I love listening to the Professional Rule Breaker because I was so impressed with the Professional Rule Breaker podcast that I thought, I think I want to do that too.
Well, welcome back to the Professional Rule Breaker Show. I am your host, Kathy Walterhouse. So I have to say, I feel a little giddy today because I have a friend of mine, and my friend is an adventurer. She has done things that only people dream of. She's also a transformational coach. She's an equine practitioner. She's an author, and she even has a screenplay in the works. So I want to welcome my friend, Debbie Legg.
Hi, Kathy. That's quite an introduction. I'm like, who are you talking about?
Hey, I'm talking about you. Isn't it funny though, when we hear people talk about us, that we're sometimes kind of like, wow, is that me? Or did I actually do those things? Because I don't know, sometimes it's like we almost separate ourselves, right? From all these amazing things that we've done to who we feel that we are. But I guess I want to start off with the whole adventure thing because I just want to tell my audience this is how we originally met. We met in Costa Rica. So tell us how you went from being a nurse to having this amazing place in Costa Rica.
Well, that is a story now when I reflect back on it as well. It seems like, what were we thinking at the time? And my husband, Steve, and I, we met in 2003, and we'd both been married to someone else for 20 years and were single for a while and met each other. I was perfectly fine not being married again, but anyway, I met him and I'm like, oh, this guy can like build things and he can fix things. Well, maybe let me just think about that for a little while, because I had this bucket list, I guess. One night I was taking care of a baby at work in the middle of the night, and I said, what would I do if money or time were no object? Because now I had been divorced. I was kind of like unencumbered. And so what was it that I could do? And I wrote this list of 50 things. And one of them was, oh, what the heck, move to Costa Rica and open a retreat center. Because I'd been there on
Wow.
vacation several times. So funny because I guess the universe threw this guy down, and I picked him up and I'm like, oh, maybe he could take care of that 50th thing on my list.
So why did you write? I'm just curious because I didn't know it was a list. So first off, why did you write that list? What prompted you to do that?
Well, I think my divorce was just final, and somehow I realized how much freedom I had.
Mhm.
And being a nurse, I could work as a traveler any place I wanted in the world, basically. And my daughter was still in school, but but the whole concept of that freedom was kind of hard for me, I guess, to get a grasp of. And so I like lists. My brain likes lists. So
Okay.
so I was able to, one thing, there were things on there that were silly things, but they were important to me. And one thing was, I never wanted another car payment, believe
Mm.
it or not.
That's
Because
a great goal. I think
yeah,
financial goals are always great. Because I think the more debt free you are, the more freedom you
right,
have.
right. And I didn't want to have to worry about the car. If something happened to it because it was too shiny. So so anyway, it was just a few things like that were on the list. And so we found ourselves in Sarasota. We had bought 3 houses before the big housing a real estate bubble started in the early 2000s. And then by 2005, they were like crazy. The amount of money that they were worth, it was it was, and I added it up, and I was like, oh my God, we could sell these houses and do it and move to Costa Rica. We'd only been married for like less than a year, right? So some things happened at work, and I was like, I think this is the right timing. When the kids are all off in college, we'll have that other kind of freedom we kind of wait for. So we did that, and we unfortunately there was a big real estate bust before we got them all sold. But anyway, we figured it all out because the plan that we had originally made wasn't to have a retreat center at all. So, but that's what we needed to do in order to meet all the people that we met over the years. And but when we were doing it, I feel like we were kind of riding on this energy of just being newlyweds, and it felt like we were 15, 18 years old driving around Costa Rica in a 30-year-old Jeep with nothing but a suitcase and a backpack.
But I bet you probably have like no regrets. And for everybody who's listening as well, I'll give you a little bit of background. So Debbie and her husband Steve created this amazing resort, kind of in the middle of Costa Rica, I would say, is in Arenal somewhere, or La
Yeah.
Fortuna, and the view was of this volcano, like almost probably everywhere where you in this resort, this farm was of this volcano. And I don't know if you really know this or not, but you created something that transformed a lot of lives. Like it really was the center of like transformation for a lot of people. And I know the transformation that it made for me. And later on, I'll tell you a story that you don't know about, but
Oh.
but we can talk about that. But so you took this big plunge. You were
Mhm.
fearless, and you did this.
Right. Well, we figured, I remember when we were planning, we would sit at this iconic restaurant in Sarasota, downtown Patrick's, and we would be sipping these espresso martinis, hatching the plan. And then all of a sudden, the plan starts to be like, wow, maybe we can actually do this. And as it had happened, it just unfolded in a very easy way. And now I understand that that's because that's the way we were meant to go.
Hmm. Right, right. Sometimes things happen, when they're supposed to.
Mhm.
We wanted to do an adventure, and we happened upon your resort. Actually, I think the first time we tried to go there, we couldn't get in because you were fully booked.
Um,
Um, but it just looked like a place that I wanted to experience. And it was almost like being in tune with nature and experiences more than being in a Marriott or those type of places where everything is very sanitary and everything looks the same. You had this amazing place, and that people from all over the world gathered. You would sit, with other people that were just like, I just think about some of the people that we met there, and the titles that they held, but yet everybody was still the same. We all rode horses together, or we all did these adventures together. And I think for you, you were really key in almost pushing people to the next level. Hey there, I'm all about making a big difference, making this really big impact. So I am so thrilled to introduce to you today's podcast sponsor. They are the very last U.S. family-owned manufacturer of consumer goods products that you use every single day, and you run out of them every single day. And on top of that, their products are healthier and safer for you, and they have been made here in the great USA. My family made the switch, and I am so happy that we did, and so is everyone else in the family, because the products are amazing. So while these big giant corporations are just getting bigger and so many small businesses are really struggling to survive, why not help me in rooting for the underdog? And I'm all about the underdog instead of these giant 11 conglomerates that control 97% of the North American consumer goods market. So if you're ready to make a difference and switch away to something bigger and better, go to switchaway.com/rule breaker, drop your information, and one of my friends will reach out to you directly. And let's all switch away together to better quality products that are healthier and safer for you and support family-owned businesses, because together we can rewrite the business landscape and make a difference one person at a time.
Well, I think it was with the help of the horses when I started to learn about horses and learn about how horses can support us as our growth as a human being. But that came with understanding, like you said, being connected to nature. But also first we have to be connected to our natural self, who we are at our core, because when we can connect with nature, if we're not in tune with who we are, we can't be in tune with nature as well. So the horses support that by even everyone that came through didn't need to be a retreat, even just came for a day ride, things like that. What Before anyone was allowed to get on the horses to go ride to the waterfall and have fun for the day riding horses, there had to be a connection and you had to build a connection and a relationship with your horse. And you couldn't get on until it happened. And we would know that it happened when the horse was following the person around without a rope on.
Mm. I saw somewhere that you had written that the horses are like 1,000-pound biofeedback machine.
Exactly, right.
And so they can read you, they know who you are. But I mean, you just think about anybody. It's like when you're in the presence of other people, if you are still enough, you can get their energy, you can read them by maybe their body language and some other things as well.
Yeah, the Heart Math organization is an international organization, kind of like a clearinghouse for work that's being done on electromagnetic field of the heart. And that's what we're talking about. It's like our vibe.
Yep.
And the horses can read that vibe because their life depends on it. This is how the herds stay together, how flocks of birds fly, schools of fish, those kind of things. And so when we walk into the room or the arena with a horse, they don't see how old we are, how big we are, anything, our skill sets or skills that we think we have as a horseman. No, they just see what is the emotion, basically. What is the energy coming toward me? And if it's something like fear, because everyone's afraid to ride a horse if they never rode a horse, um, that's okay. And so they magnify the fear until really we have to start talking about it instead of covering it up. And you don't have to not be afraid to ride the horse. You just have to tell the horse, yeah, I am afraid of falling off. And the horse is like, all right, I know how to handle that. We're going to go slow.
I think a great skill that you have is helping people pass their fears and going to the next level. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like what Tony Robbins does. Tony Robbins has the fire walk where you walk on hot coals and you see the coals burning before you walk on it. It's that same type of like, oh, I can't do this. So I remember a time that we were there, and we were there as a family with the kids, and everybody wanted to go zip lining.
Okay.
And in the previous trip, it was actually a business trip that my husband and I had done. We were in the same area, and we remember we were at this beautiful waterfall in La Fortuna, and we kept hearing like this screaming, and we couldn't figure out where the screaming was coming from. And eventually we looked like way, thousands of feet up high, and we saw these people coming out of like this heavily forested area, like at the top. It almost like it wasn't necessarily a mountain, but it was like this huge cliff. And they were ziplining. And both Steve and I, my husband and I, said, we're never doing that, ever. We're not doing it. So, of course, when we go back, we're talking to you, we're setting this trip up. And I'm like, the kids and my husband are going, I am not going to go. And I'll never forget what you said to me. You said, if you go, this will change your life. And then I went, Oh, okay.
Not one of those things. I
Yeah.
did. That's what I said. Boy, that was a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. And it was because you were pushing me to face my fears,
Mhm.
to go. I don't even remember what. I mean, first off, these ziplining in Costa Rica is a whole different experience because the length and the height that you are at is, I don't think there's anything close to that here in the
Well,
States.
it's like being afraid of being in an airplane
Yeah,
of
it
heights.
basically is
It's
like
that
you are
high.
in an
Yeah.
airplane, but you're not in an airplane
Right.
when you're doing this.
Right.
And
Right.
there's just a wire and a hook that is between you and thousands of feet below you.
Uh-huh.
So that's what I said. I think you have this really great skill because you knew I was afraid. Just like there's people that maybe were afraid to get on horses or, go on all
Oh,
these
man.
different types of
But
adventures. To be able to push people that direction is a real skill.
we offered in the La Fortuna area, one of the beautiful things is they have just top-notch in zip line operators and whitewater rafting and canyoning. So these three, like you're rappelling down waterfalls and canyons. Did you ever do that?
I
Yeah.
didn't do that. That was on my next list.
Oh,
We
it
haven't
was
done
on
that
your
yet.
list to do. Okay. Anyway, so
I
I
am
mean,
really scared of that. I think I'm more scared of that than ziplining.
yeah, it took me a long time to do that. I'm afraid of heights too. But so what I would tell people, because I was afraid to go whitewater rafting and zip lining, and I was afraid of all those things. Not if I mean like because I'm afraid of heights. Like I don't even want to
I
say
never
afraid.
used to be, but I am now. I've gone
Yeah,
some really high places and now I'm like, what
right.
am I doing? But again, it's all about facing that fear. I think, and it can relate to anything. It can relate to anything, even in your business life. You have a fear to make a phone call. You have maybe a fear of creating a course. You have a fear of selling, which is a lot of people out there have
Mhm.
this fear of selling. And if you kind of just almost change your outlook, like the minute you said to me is you'll never be the same again if you do this, I
Mhm.
kind of went, okay, it's an opportunity for me to grow. I'm going to I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the chance that I'm going to face my fear. And like I said, it's a metaphor. It's the same thing that Tony Robbins does.
Right.
It's a metaphor. When you walk on the coals, that's a metaphor. If you can do this, what else can you do in your life?
So when I during my coaching practice, we talk a lot of fear comes up a lot of times when people are working with horses, fear and vulnerability. And so we can get as emotions, those two are very different. So fear itself is an external threat to your well-being. That's
Hmm.
it. You're going to die or get hurt.
Hmm.
Well, that could be ziplining. That could be what you're worried about. But so this is where the lines can get crossed. And then the message behind fear is move to a place of safety. That's it. That's what
Hmm.
you ask yourself, what is a threat? And then move to a place of safety. There's no other, this very primal way of survival. Where vulnerability, it's an internal threat to your self-image or your belief system. And then you ask yourself, well, how might my life change I if I step into vulnerability, if I step into what's in front of me. And
Yeah.
so people can feel so vulnerable with, like you said, starting a new course online or moving to a new location. But those things, it's not, you're not going to die from those things.
Hmm.
Your body is responding to that. And
Hmm.
also, maybe logically, you knew that you weren't going to die from it,
Hmm.
but it felt really vulnerable. And sometimes the fear and vulnerability circuit in our brain is not that defined in some cases. And when you sort it out, you realize I'm not going to die. I'm just feeling super vulnerable. And how will my life change if I step into that?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
always used to tell people too, I'm like, okay, you don't want to go. When is the last time you did something for the first time?
Ooh,
That's what I would
yeah.
say. And then they're like, all right, I'm going. Yeah.
I love that. When was the last time you did something for the first time?
Hmm.
Wow. That's great. That's actually a lot to think about because I think, first off, when you do something for the first time, you have that potentially vulnerability, right?
Mhm.
But there's also that thrill, that excitement. It's things that maybe you will remember. There's a gentleman by the name of Jesse Itzler, who is married to the founder of Spanx, Sarah, and I'm blank on her last name, but he is all about having a calendar, putting your calendar for a year out and planning, in essence, those things that are special for you that literally are things that maybe you'll do for the first time, things that are so memorable for you. And it can be almost anything. It can be
Mm.
write a book, it could be zip lining, could be that. It could be run a marathon or just have a weekend of complete silence. It can be almost anything, but these things that will profoundly impact you and give you juice for life.
Right.
So this kind of similar, but I love that. When was the last time you did something for the first time?
I took a course last year to add to my coaching foundation to be a death doula.
Mm,
And I also worked a little bit since I came back to the States as a hospice nurse in the hospice program, and really found there's a huge need for a supportive process when we're going through the stages of death. But if you look at that, if you look at a bucket list, right? People have this, all of a sudden their bucket list like shows up when they get 6 months to live.
yeah.
But this is really, we can start preparing for our death by living our life.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
And
Why
so,
wait?
yeah, right. Why wait? And then when's the last time I did something for the first time is really a bucket list in itself, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
it absolutely is. Wow. Gosh, it's so interesting because this is not the subject matter that I thought we were going to talk about, but I love
Uh-huh.
being able to talk about this as well because there's so many people out there that they might be working a job, but they have these dreams of doing something else, or they have a business, but they're afraid to go to the next level.
Mhm.
So, what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for, I would say two things, waiting for you completely fail, or something really tragic happens in your life, or you're at the end stage of life and then you're going to have all this regret? Or, why not go and just go for it and be vulnerable and really think about what, because a lot of times, like when I help people with sales, I'm always like, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? You
Mhm.
pick up the phone or you go see somebody. What's the worst thing that can happen? Are you going to die doing it?
No, no.
Probably like
Just go to boom.
99.999999%. No, you won't. So what's the worst thing? Let's say no. Or maybe I'll just be an unpleasant experience. But what if they say yes? Or what if you learn something? And even what if you fail,
Right,
right?
right. We tried. Well, I think the beginning when we started our business, so we bought this 28 or 26 acre dairy farm that was just a kind of a disaster. It was almost completely deforested, but with that view of the volcano, right?
Hmm.
So the first thing that we were really passionate about was getting the trees planted. So we planted new trees to help the environment and the animals come back into the environment. But I felt like as you're talking about growing that business, so we started with three little cabins, and I remember I did a PowerPoint presentation because I like PowerPoint presentations, and I put it on a CD or DVD, and I sent it to all the family and relatives at the same time. So, and I felt like I was defending what we were doing. Now that I look back, when I think about what was in that, I was being on the defensive, growing the
Mm.
business to start with. Well, we didn't speak Spanish either, so that was really tough. But anyway, but then something switched, right? After a few years, we started turning away so many reservations.
Hmm.
And then it's like, oh wow, I think that's that point where you're given the choice of switching to the next mode. And for me, I think it was being on the offense.
Hmm. Being on the offense. But there's something else that you did by sending out this PowerPoint presentation
Uh-huh.
to all your friends, your relatives, you literally set it up as a non-negotiable. You put it at, first off, you put your vision out there, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you set it up as a non-negotiable. And I know people that are listening probably have heard me talk about setting things up as a non-negotiable, that no matter what, you're going to accomplish what it is, that you are set up to do, that it doesn't matter what it takes, you're going to do it. So when you put it out there for people to see, then you have this thing in the back of your head, probably like, oh, what if I fail? I don't want to fail. These people know what I want to do. So it almost pushes you to move forward. So I think it's the same thing like when people need to lose weight and they'll say, hey, they'll put it on Facebook. I've seen it a bunch of times on Facebook. I've gotten sloppy. I'm planning on losing 25 pounds, whatever the number is. And when you put it out there, it's almost a standard. Don't you think that maybe it's kind of like, yeah, okay, I put it out there, I better do it.
You're committing to something greater than yourself, to Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, when we first opened, so we moved there in 2006. And so we built these 3 cabins and they were ready to go by January 1st of 2007.
Wow.
And so I had created the internet using like dial-up. I mean, it was, I'm not the website using dial-up. It was just so painfully slow. The internet was really not good there yet. And, so we were like open for business. Let's January 1st. And I'm sitting at my desk staring at the phone. And that was the first time I thought, what in the heck were we thinking?
Oh,
That was the very first time that after we were ready to open and we had like a blank calendar. And so I'm staring at the phone and I'm not kidding you. The phone rings and I pick it up and I'm like, hello, Leaves and Lizards. And the person said, hello, this is Lainey from Brides Magazine. And I'm like, oh, first, like they speak English. And then the second was like Brides Magazine. I just about was like, oh my God. I'm like, how can I help you? Right. And she said, well, we're coming to Costa Rica to do a story on places to go on your honeymoon. We're going to be going to the Four Seasons. And then we'd like to come to your place. And I'm like,
oh
the
my
Four
goodness.
Seasons and our place? What is she, I'm like, sure, that would be great. When we're really on the path that we're meant to be on and we're following what's being asked of us in the bigger picture, no, that's not synchronicity, right? That was
No,
a sign saying, no, it's
you're on the
fine.
right path.
And you know what? We never got one reservation out of that article.
Oh no, but at
No,
least, but you know what? You
but
don't
it was
know
in.
because you can use it as a reference. Hey, we were featured in Brides
Right.
Magazine.
Oh yeah. 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 We
That
did all,
point, and
but
and so it added credibility
right.
to your
Right.
place because people otherwise could be like, is this kind of a scary place to go to, not safe place or whatever? But
Sure. Yeah.
instead,
We
Brides
used it for all
Magazine.
those things, but directly from that, no. So, but it was interesting. But it was, I needed that big of a sign to say you're doing fine. Because also, like, we were still like in this honeymoon phase of our relationship anyway, as well, right? So
Yeah.
it was really,
But I mean, that's so amazing. It really is. I think a lot of times when you put things out there and you can visualize what it is that you want, and your brain in the background is doing all this processing while you sleep, while you do everything,
mhm.
So if you're visualizing your end goal of whatever it is, and you kind of know what your steps are in between, things kind of fall into place. Granted, this whole thing with the Brides magazine, that isn't something. Could you have visualized that? Yeah, absolutely. But again, things just start to fall into place. So, I mean, if you had, and a lot of times people visualize the opposite, right? They visualize bad things happening
Mhm.
and this isn't going to work. So if you spend all your time thinking, gosh, even just in sales, everybody's going to say no to me, or I'm never going to be able to do this, or this resort, no one's ever going to come to this resort.
Mhm.
Chances are you're going to fulfill that visualization as well.
Yeah, I don't remember like that was the only time that I felt like when I was sitting, like I said, at my desk that day, that I felt like, what, oh my God, what in the heck what are we doing? That was the only time I ever felt like that during that time. But then other programs that I would have ideas for to do different kinds of programs. And if they didn't work, like I learned over the years there that, okay, I would get this great idea and it would seem kind of crazy, but I would try it. And if it wouldn't work through the, and nobody would make reservations or it didn't work. I used to push it to try to fix it, to make it work.
Mm,
But
okay.
that's not what wanted to happen. And so, and toward the end of our time there, we left in 2020, we sold it. Toward the end of our time, I learned that if I would try a new thing and the door closed, I'd be like, okay, it's not supposed to be that. And I'd go right to the next one without taking it personally, without feeling like I failed. I'm like, well, that one's not working. Well, what about this one?
Hmm.
And go and plan in that direction. And then it's fun.
Yeah.
Don't spend a lot of energy just wondering, what did I do wrong? No, just wonder, okay, what is it that I am meant to be following?
Right. Making a pivot into something else. And
Mhm,
at the same time, you're learning from whatever didn't work
mhm,
and you're able to move on to the next thing. So, yeah, that's a great lesson as well. Because I think sometimes we try to ram things in without, it's almost like a tunnel vision without looking at, okay, what else is going on? And can I make a shift? Can we do something different? You know, because one word, one something different can make something that wasn't working into something that was working. And even just
mhm,
an attitude shift can take something that wasn't working into something that wasn't. And then one of the best things that you said was you moved on to the next thing is having that skill of being able to let things just roll off your shoulders
mhm.
as well.
Well, I wasn't like that because it's difficult. I mean, there are so many challenges in that kind of business because there's TripAdvisor, there's so many places that
Mhm.
people give reviews of things. And so every day you open up your computer and, oh my God, what did this person write on TripAdvisor? We were number one in the La Fortuna area for many years. And so, if you have that ranking and then all of a sudden somebody and it doesn't, and sometimes they weren't real. And sometimes
Oh,
there were also people would blackmail you.
interesting.
Yeah, it's so competitive. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, but at the same time, I think you were able to get past that and really
Mhm.
provide for your guests like this unbelievable experience, life changing, everything about it. The place was life
Right.
changing, the experiences were life changing, the friendships that came out of it were life changing as well. So, what are you doing now? Because you got lots of stuff on your plate.
Yeah, so well, now we came back to the United States. We bought a farm in Virginia and an old farm, Civil War era farm. I guess that apparently that was on both of our bucket lists that we didn't realize was
Oh,
fixing was buying a money pit, right? One of those kind of houses. It wasn't that bad. It was actually better than we thought. And I have some horses here. I have 6 horses here. The horses that are still in Costa Rica, my colleague Enrique has them. He's our guide, and he's doing great. Still working with them in
mhm.
down there and doing tours. But so the horses here, I'm doing leading retreats in different parts of the world with a friend of mine, Sandy Sharkey, is a wild horse photographer and advocate. And so we'll travel to different parts of the world seeing wild horses, and it's called Find Wild Horses, Find Yourself. And I do the Find Yourself part of the retreat, and she does the Wild Horses part of the retreat. So I'll work with doing equine coaching with the domestic horses where we go. I just got back from Alberta, actually. It was our 3rd year there. It was a really great group, a good experience. Yeah.
Wow. It sounds
And
like a lot of fun.
yeah, and then if people want to come here, we have a space for someone to stay, and I'll just do most of the time 3-day intensive coaching with the horses. And for a lot of people coming out of the pandemic, I'm finding it's individuals going into what you would say is their third act, right? The
Mhm.
last third of their life, where they have the time, again, the time and the resources, and they maybe finish their other list. What would you do if money or time were no object? And all of a sudden they're like, wait, uh-oh, I have to start a new list. Where do I want to go? So it's that, like taking the knowledge and the wisdom that people have experienced throughout their the first 2/3 of their life, and then putting that into something that will benefit um, the whole, or what their maybe what their reason for being is actually a lot of
Mhm.
times. Yeah.
I would have to also say though, but don't wait until you have that freedom or in being in like the third stage of your life. Because we do a lot of that, don't we? When I have X amount of something,
Mhm.
I will do this. And how many cases have you heard of where people get diagnosed with cancer or they die suddenly or they have something that, where before they were very active and now they can't do things that they've always wanted to do.
Mm.
Why is it that we do that to ourselves?
Well, yeah, we just hide behind those excuses, I guess.
Mm.
And you're
Yeah.
hiding, well, I don't really have time for that because I have to, go to the grocery store on Mondays, and then I have to serve leftovers on Tuesdays. I don't know, whatever excuses that we have.
That procrastination, which is
Yeah.
really almost,
And
it's
and
almost
it's
tied to something else.
right. It's avoiding stepping into vulnerability.
Hmm.
So one of the things that happens if we keep doing that, avoiding being vulnerable, because that's maybe what our higher self wants,
Hmm.
to do something in that is going to be of service,
Hmm.
or in for the greater good, let's say. If we don't pay attention to that, the vulnerability can intensify into feelings of panic and rage and anxiety.
Hmm.
So if once we get into that place where the vulnerability is intensified, like, I can't even imagine what it would be like, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like all panicky. You have to step back and say, because it's feeling really vulnerable,
Hmm.
to change your life in such a significant way, but you're not going to die from it.
No, you're not going to die from it. And it's better than living your life in regret or living your life frozen, not being able to do the things that you want to do because you're procrastinating or you're too scared, you have that fear. A lot of it, I even think, is that almost like an imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
because you feel like you're not worthy in some shape or form, possibly. So you put all these excuses in front of it because you think you can't do
Mhm.
something that well, maybe you'll fail. Who cares?
Mhm.
Right? Again, same thing. What's the worst thing that'll happen if you fail?
Nothing, right? And if we don't do that, if we don't step into the vulnerability, and we don't listen to that little voice that's saying, move to Costa Rica and buy a dairy farm, you're what happens is your soul then starts to die a little bit.
Yes.
The ego is our humanity. The ego gets a really bad rap, I think, in some frameworks, or ways of thinking. But really, if we just think of our ego as our humanness,
Mm,
and this our soul, or higher self, however we want to say, the energetic part of us that's not flesh and blood so much, the ego is here to be of service to whatever soul is asking. That's
mm,
how my belief system, I guess, works. But the soul doesn't know how to do things. They need an ego to be able to accomplish the tasks and get to the potential, and
mhm.
step into the potential of all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So let me ask you this question, Deb, because I know that this is who you are, but what makes you a rule breaker?
I remember when I was a teenager, and my mom, we had got this, it's called the Catholic Bulletin. We grew up Catholic,
Okay.
in the Catholic Bulletin.
I'm
And
Catholic too,
it,
so
okay, so
I know what you're talking about.
right. So, and there was this, and there was this place that I would read it, and where there was a quote from somebody. And I was 15, 16. I'm not, maybe I don't think I have my license yet, but it was the quote by Helen Keller, that
Mm,
security is mostly a superstition and does not exist in nature, nor do the children of men as a whole experience it. And avoiding danger, but I think vulnerability here, right? She's also speaking toward vulnerability,
mhm.
is no safer in the long run than downright exposure. The fearful are caught just as often as the bold. Life is either a daring adventure or it is nothing.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I cut that out and I put it in my wallet. And I feel like that was my soul speaking to me when I was a teenager, to just do it. Go for whatever is calling to you. Listen. And I had that little cutout for decades in my wallet. And every time I felt like I was, feeling like I was being too vulnerable, I was vulnerable, I would just
Yeah.
read that, and I'd be like, well, at least I
Okay.
can see and hear. Helen Keller couldn't see or hear, right?
Yeah, no, she couldn't. And she was amazing. She
Right.
really, really was amazing. Wow. I like that.
Mhm.
I really like that. It kind of reminds me a little bit. I heard something last week. It was, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't know exactly what it was, but basically find whatever you are passionate about and spend your life chasing it.
Mhm.
I think that's kind of similar of it, life is a daring adventure or nothing.
Mhm.
Very similar to that. Wow. Well, I think that those two things are we need to end on those
Yeah.
notes. I'll make sure that we have these quotes in the show notes as well, and of course, all of Debbie's contact information. And if anyone ever wants to go on an adventure, I would highly,
Mhm.
highly recommend reaching out to my friend Deborah Legg. And because I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to regret it at all. It really is. She has so many things going on and things that quite frankly could help change your life. And for everybody that's out there listening, I want you to think about some of the things that that she brought up about vulnerability. Might your life change if you stepped into your vulnerability? If I could say it, a tongue
Yeah.
twister. So I want you to think about that and then take what you do. And remember, it's always like throwing a stone into a stream and creating that ripple effect. I mean, Debbie and her husband, Steve, really created a ripple effect in our family. Myself, my husband, and my three boys. It, first off, gave us a sense of adventure, that adventure is good and fun to do, but we learned so much about ourselves and really almost pushing us to like the next level.
Mm.
So just think about that. What is it that if you step into your vulnerability, how could your life change? So again, everyone, thank you so much for being here and listening to the Professional Rule Breaker. I want to give a big thanks and shout out to my friend Debbie Legg. Again, her information will be in the show notes. And until next time, my friends, go out there and break some rules.